Vin Diesel is known as the tough, quiet action star in Hollywood. He made movies like Fast and Furious, XXX, and Pitch Black super famous with his stories about speed, loyalty, and never giving up. He was born into a poor family without a father and was raised by his single mom on the rough streets of New York. Back then, he was a nobody. Hollywood didn't want him because they said he wasn't white enough to play white characters and not black enough to play black characters. He started out as a nightclub bouncer just trying to survive. Then he borrowed $3,000 from friends and made his own movie because no one else would give him a chance. He built his own way in when all the doors were closed to him. But even though he became famous, the darkness inside never went away. He lost people he loved and dealt with constant physical pain. Life's storms haunted him for decades. Now at 58 years old, his body and soul carry countless scars. Vin Diesel isn't just an action star anymore. He's living proof that even the strongest person can break but still keep going, powered by pure willpower and unwavering loyalty. His story began in a place where nobody saw the broken beginnings. In Alameda County, California, on July 18, 1967, a baby boy came into the world. On his birth certificate, there was no father's name written down, just a blank space like a question mark stamped into his destiny. That baby was Mark Sinclair, the boy who would later become known as Vin Diesel. His life started in silence, but not the peaceful kind. It was the kind of silence that hums with questions that nobody could answer. His mother, Dolores Charlene Vincent, was a dreamer who read the stars to try to make sense of a world that didn't always make sense back to her. She was an astrologer, an actress, and a woman full of courage but also exhaustion. His real biological father had already disappeared like a ghost without even saying goodbye, leaving only mystery behind. When people asked him about his missing father decades later, Diesel's voice barely rose above a whisper. All he knew from his mother was that he had connections to many different cultures. It was a sentence that sounded peaceful on the surface, but underneath it lived the quiet pain of a lifetime spent wondering where he truly came from. When Mark was 3 years old, his mother met Irving H. Vincent, a black theater teacher from Harlem who was patient, grounded, and kind. He became the only father Mark would ever know. Irving adopted both twins, Mark and his brother Paul Vincent, and later they raised 2 more children named Tim and Samantha. The family packed up what little they had and moved to West Beth Artists Housing in New York City. It was like a maze of cracked walls and flickering lights where broken painters, failed poets, and fading actors paid their rent with their dreams. The elevators didn't work. The heat often failed during winter. Rent was cheap, but hope was even cheaper. It wasn't fancy or glamorous, Diesel said later, but it was filled with imagination, and that's what saved them. Mark slept beside the window on a thin mattress, listening to police sirens sing him to sleep every night. He wasn't poor by choice, but by design. There were nights when dinner was just a story. His mother's voice would weave tales about the stars to make her children forget about the hunger in their stomachs. But even in that small, dark apartment, something beautiful lived there. His stepfather taught acting to kids who couldn't afford lessons. His mother wrote horoscopes and scripts that no one ever read. The walls were full of dreams, Diesel recalled, and they had to dream just to survive. He was a quiet child, but inside him burned an anger he couldn't name or understand. Other kids had fathers who came to school plays while he only had questions that haunted him when he looked in the mirror. He once said that mirrors were both his enemy and his teacher because every time he looked, he saw a different man staring back at him. Years later, he described it himself with a smile that hid pain. His racial identity was like Schrodinger's cat, neither one thing nor another until someone opened the box. New York in the 1970s was a jungle of survival. Graffiti covered the subways and streetlights flickered out faster than dreams. Then came the night that changed everything in his life. He was 7 years old, cold, and reckless. A pack of neighborhood boys, including Mark, broke into a small theater in Greenwich Village with their pockets full of crayons and mischief. They expected police sirens to come. Instead, the stage lights came on. Standing before them wasn't a cop but Destiny herself in the form of Crystal Field, the theater's director. She didn't yell at them or call the police. She handed them scripts instead and told them to come back tomorrow and earn those $20 on stage. That moment, a choice between destruction and creation, saved his life. From that night forward, Mark Sinclair never left the stage again. Acting became the home he never had, a language for everything he couldn't say out loud. It gave him control when the world gave him chaos and purpose where there once was only silence. Years later, he looked back and said quietly that if he hadn't walked into that theater that night, he might have walked into something far worse. Those early years were raw, cold, and hungry, but they forged something indestructible inside him. They built the boy who would one day become Vin Diesel, a man who turned pain into fuel, who built family out of emptiness and strength out of silence. Because before he ever spoke on screen, he had already learned how to survive the hardest way possible. The silence that shaped him as a boy followed him into adulthood like a ghost that never stopped whispering in his ear. New York was louder now and crueler too. The city glittered for those who could afford to dream, but for Mark Sinclair, dreams were a kind of luxury he couldn't have. By the time he turned 18, he had left college halls for the streets, trading books for survival. He studied literature at Hunter College, but hunger spoke louder than any professor ever could. He didn't quit school, he once said, he just couldn't afford to pretend anymore. He lived in small rented rooms where the heat broke more often than it worked and where the walls smelled of old rain and cigarettes. Nights were the hardest, the kind where you count the coins in your pocket and wonder if they'll stretch until morning. During the day, he sold light bulbs over the phone, and by night, he guarded doors in Manhattan's roughest nightclubs like Tunnel, Mars, and Limelight. The job title was bouncer, but what he really did was survive every single night. Every shift was a fight, sometimes with men twice his size and sometimes with the weight of exhaustion itself. He said once that he got into 500 fights a year and that's who he was, surviving but not really living. The clubs were his battlegrounds, flashing with strobe lights and spilled whiskey everywhere. Music thundered and fists flew constantly. Outside, the winter wind cut through his jacket like a knife, and he would walk home bruised and sometimes bleeding with his knuckles aching and his pockets empty. Yet beneath all those bruises, something was forming inside him, a discipline and a quiet kind of rage that would one day become real strength. For 10 years, he guarded doors that would never open for him, he said, but he learned how to keep standing when they slammed shut in his face. Auditions came and went over the years. Casting directors looked at his skin, his name, and his ambiguity and didn't know what to do with him. He was too white but not white enough, too black but not black enough either. They didn't know what box to put him in. Each rejection felt personal, as if Hollywood itself was saying you don't belong anywhere at all. He grew tired of waiting for permission to exist in their world, so he did the unthinkable and gave that permission to himself. With $3,000 borrowed from friends, he bought a second-hand camera and shot a short film in 3 sleepless days. It was called Multifacial and told the story of an actor who couldn't fit into anyone's box, just like him. He wrote it, directed it, acted in it, and scored it himself because no one else would help him do it. When he finished, he was broke again and his future looked smaller than ever before. But that film, raw and imperfect and true, carried something no rejection could kill, and that was honesty. When Multifacial was invited to the Cannes Film Festival in 1995, he arrived without a tuxedo, without an agent, and without any expectations. He didn't walk the red carpet but walked the pavement outside, watching his dream flicker on a French screen. Somewhere in that crowd, Steven Spielberg was watching too, and a door that had stayed shut for a decade finally opened for him. Those years of hunger, of bruised knuckles and cold nights had forged something stronger than fame could ever give, and that was resilience. The world would come to know him as Vin Diesel, the unstoppable force of speed and loyalty, but before the engines roared and before the lights of Hollywood found him, he had already learned the greatest truth of all, which is when no one believes in you, you build belief out of your own blood and sweat and tears and you keep going no matter what anyone says. Fame didn't arrive for him like a sunrise, but hit him like a storm instead. One phone call from Steven Spielberg shattered the silence that had followed him for years and years. The legendary director had watched Multifacial and written a special role just for him in Saving Private Ryan in 1998. Suddenly, Mark Sinclair, the bouncer from New York, was standing on a battlefield in France beside Tom Hanks, holding a rifle under Spielberg's command and direction. The cameras rolled and something inside him broke loose. The same hunger that had once fought through nights of cold and rejection came pouring out. That performance, raw and trembling with emotion, opened every door that had ever been closed to him before. But every open door comes with its own kind of weight and pressure. Hollywood embraced him quickly, maybe even too quickly for his own good. Within just 2 years, he became the face of a brand new generation of action heroes that everyone wanted to see. Pitch Black in 2000 turned him into an icon overnight. The Fast and the Furious in 2001, made for just $38 million, roared to over 207 million worldwide and shocked everyone. Then came X in 2002, grossing $277 million and proving that he wasn't just an actor anymore, but a real brand that people trusted.